Hi there. It is Tuesday and we're in Luke 17 today. And there's so much in here. It was hard to know where to go and what to focus on today. But I have decided to look at the section about forgiveness. Jesus tells his disciples, tells us, that no matter how many times a fellow believer wrongs us, whether it's 7 times a day, if they turn again and ask forgiveness, we must forgive. Oof. And that feels really tough because, side note, we're not talking here about people who don't know any better, people who are not Christians. We're talking about fellow believers. So we're talking about our friends and family in church. If they sin against us, then we're to forgive them, no matter even if we think they should know better. And no matter if that happens over and over again. And I think the disciples respond to Jesus with the same kind of sense of incredulity that I think we have as well. Like, say, what now? That's a lot. If you want us to do that, you're going to have to increase our faith. We're going to need loads more faith for that because that might be all right for you, Jesus, but that's really hard. And actually, Jesus comes back at them and says, do you know what? This isn't about the amount of faith you have. This is about using what you have, because he says, if you had faith, even as small as a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, may you be uprooted and thrown into the sea, and it would obey you. Essentially, as Christians, we're servants, and we serve Jesus, but we're not our own, and serving him isn't optional, and obeying isn't optional, and forgiving isn't therefore optional. This is not something we need a lot of faith for. It's just our duty. It's just what we're called to do. Use what you've got. Exercise the faith that you have and act on what you know to be true. We know that it is our duty to do this. It's our duty to forgive because we have received forgiveness. Whew, that's tough. Jesus goes on to tell the story or talk about a servant and say, you know, when a servant comes in from ploughing or taking care of the sheep, his master doesn't say, you know, come on in and eat with me. And he doesn't thank him for what he's done. He just expects him to get on and do the work. And to our Western ears, that sounds funny because we think of a servant kind of like an employee. You know, you get paid for a day's work and you get thanked for that and you go off home. But actually in the context there, he was really probably more talking about like a slave or a bond servant who was in debt to his creditor, to his master. And the option was a debt that he could not pay at all. So the option was get thrown into jail and the key thrown away, locked up and thrown away. Or if the creditor was really generous, then he might allow you to work off your debt. So you weren't working until the end of the day, you were working until the debt was paid. And so you're not going to get thanked for that because you already owe so much more than you can repay. And we're in that position with God, aren't we? We have a debt we could never pay. We owe, God doesn't owe us anything. We owe God everything. And we need to come to him for forgiveness. We therefore owe forgiveness to others. It's just a duty that we have. And I'm really interested as well with how he then goes on to talk about how the lepers responded to Jesus's instruction and how well they obeyed him. Because it's interesting, they come asking to be healed. They come asking Jesus for healing. And actually what they get is an instruction. They get an order. They get told to go and present themselves to the priest. And at that point, they're not healed. There's been no change. They're being asked to go and get checked to see that they are clean enough to go back into society when they are not clean. And I'm challenged by that. I wonder whether I have the attitude of a servant, that I would follow God's instruction, whether I would have enough faith to do what God asked me to do, even if I didn't understand, even if it didn't make sense, even if I hadn't seen the healing yet, would I do what I'd been told? just because God had asked me to do it, just because He told me to do it. Because thinking, God's told me to do something, I'll have a think about that and I'll have a pray about that. That's not obedience. That's just agreeing with God. That's saying like, I might do what you say. Like, obedience is obedience. Obedience is saying, right, I'm going to go. So yeah, I was really challenged by that today. Yeah, I'm going to be thinking a bit on that. I'll see you tomorrow.